Hello and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
I'm Junglist. It feels like years since we first heard about Will Wright's new game, Spore.
It is.
It is?
Years. 2005, in fact. First there was 2 years of just hardcore research, and then he brought in prototypes. You know, originally it was called Sim Everything.
It's been years since we heard about Will Wright's new game, Spore, the game where you can take charge of the evolution of an entire species. Tonight it gets chickened.
We get our tools out and our virtual fingers dirty in the new Viva Pinata game, Trouble in Paradise.
And a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, the first Star Wars game was developed. The Force is well and truly with us in this week's Backwards Compatible. But first, can you guess the game for this week?
And that's about the most recent game we've ever asked you to guess. News time, Mr. Junglist.
Good game! Square Enix has lodged a friendly takeover bid for fellow Japanese games house Tecmo, the developer best known for the hack-and-slash Ninja Gaiden. Tecmo has been through some troubled times recently, with the departure in July of Ninja Gaiden creator Tomonobu Itagaki and subsequent resignation of company president Yoshimi Yasuda occurring after the two had a rather public falling out. No stranger to such corporate maneuvers, Square Enix itself is the result of a 2003 merger between the studios responsible for the legendary Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest series. And in 2005, Square Enix acquired another veteran Japanese studio in Taito, a move which brought arcade classics Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble under the same roof. If successful, the Tecmo buyout would see Square Enix receive a major injection of talent in the action genre to complement its already formidable RPG expertise. At a top-secret Xbox Japan event last week, Microsoft took the opportunity to unveil Ninja Blade, an Xbox 360 exclusive developed by From Software. You may recall that the name Ninja Blade was accidentally leaked onto a Microsoft website before this year's E3, but then not actually shown or even announced at the event. Ninja Blade will be From Software's fourth Xbox 360 title after Chrome Hounds, Enchanted Arms, and Tenchu Z, and is set for release in 2009.
Good game!
The latest kids game to hit the Xbox 360 features wild animals feeding on each other, frantic mating, and genocide, all to the sound of children cheering.
Are you sure?
Did I mention their piñatas, John? The God game with gardening gloves is back in Viva Pinata, Trouble in Paradise.
Horstachio, the world's most popular piñata, has
Grow plants, whack weeds, and attract as many and varied piñatas as you can in this beautiful blooming bonanza.
There's plenty of bugs in number 2, but not the bad kind. Over 50% more piñatas join the party this time around, along with a simpler interface and plenty of shortcuts for both gameplay and controls. For example, now you can designate a few points with your shovel and have the inside area instantly turn to normal soil.
It's all presented like a kids' TV show, with silly characters and over-the-top voice acting.
Ouch!
In fact, you won't find a negative tone in the whole game, and it seems every few seconds you're congratulated for doing something right, even when you've done nothing at all.
Figuring out the objective of Viva Pinata has always been a challenge, so this time around they've introduced a level system. And at the start it kind of looks like you'll be able to have a larger garden, which would have been pretty cool, Badge. You know, I was kind of looking forward to making a really big garden that would have been cool to walk through. This isn't the case, unfortunately, but what it does let you do is sort of see the little piñatas that come up to the edge of your garden and see what it's all about. Then you can study them and figure out what they need to take up residence.
Of course, the big new feature is co-op, with drop-in, drop-out with a second controller or 4-player online. John, we've always kind of looked at Viva Pinata as a game which is a pyramid of puzzles.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of little puzzles like worms need this kind of food, this kind of house to mate, this then attracts birds, and so on. These puzzles kind of build up in a sort of pyramid where at the top there's lots of micromanagement. And it'll be great to have a co-op player to help out with that micromanagement.
Speaking of micro, it's just as intense as the first one, except the piñatas are actually better at eating this time around, so you'll spend most of your time worrying about the food chain and getting rid of pests. Overall, Jung, I felt it was a bit easier than the first one.
I'd direct my kids to play this. Some of the words are a little big for the very little ones, but to me it's just a metaphor for management. Analyzing needs, fostering a system where those below you can succeed, building a sustainable system from the ground up. And when I have a kid, I want little Jungie to run a publicly listed company by the time he's 10. And this is the training program to put him through. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It can get pretty complex, but I don't see many adults actively playing this. The introductory videos for the piñatas are still very annoying, but thankfully it's only in the first garden. Other than that, it's a great game for kids. I'm giving it 7.
Good game!
Well, it's been a big month for Xbox Live Arcade, following on from our first 10 out of 10 for the season, Braid. And when there's too many games coming out to review, it's roundup time.
An arcade classic comes back with HD graphics in the form of Galaga Legions, but this time there's a twist. Your ship can place 2 satellites to fire in any cardinal direction. Satellites are immune to enemies. The closer they are to the enemy, the faster they fire.
Killing the leader of a squad will wipe out their whole formation, which is a problem later on when they protect themselves like this.
Enemy paths are shown on screen as they warp in, so you can set up your satellites in a good spot, sit back, and watch the ensuing wicked business.
Satellites become more uber with a captured Galaga, the only power-up in the game.
As with Ikaruga, surviving is not the same as winning. You're good if you can get to the end of the level, but if you want that all-important high score, you're gonna have to figure out how to work the enemies for the best multiplier before wiping them all out. I loved it. I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Legions does for Galaga what Championship Edition did for Pac-Man. It's another classic improved and another home run for Bandai Namco. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Bizarre's Geometry Wars gets another outing with 6 killer game modes in Geometry Wars Retro Evolved 2. In addition to the normal mode with limited lives and bombs, there's a timed mode with unlimited lives called Deadline, and the new King mode only lets you fire from safe zones that pop up around the map.
The Waves mode is back, forcing you to dodge multiple waves of rockets. And Sequence mode is a series of scripted spawns where if you die, you just go to the next area. And my personal favourite, Pacifism mode, which doesn't let you fire any shots and forces you to go through gates to kill enemies.
Each mode also offers local multiplayer, either working together in cooperative or competing for score in versus. You'll still want to spend most of your time in single player, but it's a welcome addition, and at least now you don't have to ignore that annoying second person in the room.
As usual, it's all about the points, and you'll be checking the leaderboards after every high score. Every death in Geometry Wars feels like a fluke, so you always want to have one more go. I'm giving it 8.5 rubber chickens.
It's kind of funny that Geometry Wars started off as a free game with Project Gotham Racing, and now it's probably more popular than PGR. It's great for all colors, shapes, and sizes. I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
John, come on! Another remake that drastically improves on the original is Bionic Commando Rearmed, where you have a robotic arm to swing, climb, and take cover from enemies, as well as giving yourself one hell of a back scratch.
Platform verticality is the name of the game here. There's usually a perfect position to be in to take out each kind of enemy, and you'll be scratching your head as you figure out how to do this in different conditions, such as a level where the lights turn out.
A hacking minigame breaks up the action, as does a top-down shoot-'em-up when you're attacked between missions. All up, a good well-rounded game and a big nostalgia hit for those who played it on the NES. I'm giving it 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I liked it, and it kept on throwing different enemies at me that forced me to think differently. I don't think I'd spend too much time in it, though. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Website Newgrounds are also jumping on the Xbox Live Arcade bandwagon with their hand-drawn beat-em-up Castle Crashers. A heavy attack, light attack, jump, block, and magic button is all you'll need to smash through waves of barbarians, thieves, and beasts. But the challenge comes in the form of Castle Crash's many bosses.
The focus is on co-op here. There's a 4-player campaign, both local and online, as well as being able to verse your mates in the arena. As you gain experience, you can upgrade your character in strength, defense, agility, or magic.
It holds up okay as a beat-em-up, and they try and give you something new with each level. In fact, it reminded me a lot of Battletoads with the chases and stuff. It's the humour that makes it enjoyable though, enemies doing funny things and outrageous bosses.
A lot of people are unable to connect to online games at the moment, and there's a problem where the game sometimes doesn't save properly. This is unfortunate in a game so focused on co-op, but the developers have said there will be a patch ASAP. Still, single player is pretty fun for a laugh. I'm giving it 6.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It's highly replayable with lots of unlocks and multiplayer options. I quite like the style of it, Jung. I'm giving it 7 out of 10. Well, that's our roundup. Coming up later in the show, Spore.
But now, Fatal Rage of Conflict.
Round 1, fight.
Hey, I'm here to pick up some, peaches.
It's me, Mario!
I'm not here to fight you, midget. I'm just doing a pickup for Bowser's removal.
You're not gonna take my peaches!
Great, another nut job.
Suck my reptile!
Was one of Mother Nature's children, and you threw it like it was nothing more than a Pikmin. That's sick.
I'm the best!
Oh, this is worse than delivering to the Raccoon City pet store.
Kiss my butt!
Right, that's it, you little freak.
Welcome to the Mario Party, pal.
All right, prison rules. Prepare to feel my mohawk.
Winner.
Mario!
Yes, my princess?
Toilet's blocked again! You better fix it right now!
Mamma mia. Good game.
For more than 30 years, George Lucas has kept our galaxy enthralled with his science fiction saga of evil galactic empires, hokey religions, and super sweet space-age saber-slashing. Of course, we're talking about Star Wars. The first video game to be set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away was this. It came out way back in 1982 for the Atari 2600, and even though it was the first Star Wars game ever, it was actually based on the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back. In it, you had to assume the role of a rebel pilot, gunning down Imperial walkers in your snowspeeder on the snow-covered battlefields of Hoth. Not a bad start, but this young Padawan was yet to become a master, and the next step in its Jedi training was this. Star Wars hit the arcade in 1983. Its primitive 3D graphics put you behind the controls of Luke Skywalker's X-Wing spaceship and challenged you to take on an armada of Imperial TIE fighters, and ultimately to make the climactic run through the Death Star Trench, making a pretty explosion as you went. Over the next few years, Star Wars would produce 2 more arcade sequels based on the other 2 films in the trilogy. Both were shooters, although only The Empire Strikes Back would maintain the 3-dimensional look of the first arcade game, with Return of the Jedi opting for a more traditional 2D angle. Meanwhile, on the home console front, Star Wars was just hitting the Nintendo Entertainment System. Both the original film and The Empire Strikes Back were given the platform game treatment, with the young Skywalker this time having to conquer plenty of risky jumps, as well as the Galactic Empire. Unfortunately, these games leaned more towards the dark side than the light side when it came to gameplay, and it would take several years later, until the release of the Super NES, for LucasArts to get that part right. When the Super Star Wars series first arrived in 1992, it pretty much made every Star Wars fan's dreams come true. Here for the first time was a game that authentically replicated the look, feel, and sound of the movies. And on top of all that, the gameplay was more fun than going to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. On the PC, Star Wars was also making a big impact. In 1993, LucasArts would release some of the greatest space combat games of all time, in the form of the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series. In X-Wing, you played a pure-hearted rebel pilot taking it to the dark side from your cockpit, while TIE Fighter let you dirty your hands on the other side of the Force as an Imperial pilot gunning for rebel blood. The PC would also see several other classic Star Wars games over the next few years, including the Rebel Assault and Dark Forces series, along with about 1 million others. The mid to late 90s was a good time to be a Star Wars fan. The original trilogy was re-released in cinemas, loaded up with all new computer-generated special effects, and the games too were coming in thick and fast. The PlayStation was on the receiving end of this one-on-one fighting game called The Masters of Terrakasi, which promised epic lightsaber battles but was actually pretty terrible. Thankfully, the Nintendo 64 came to the rescue with the first game in the Rogue Squadron series, a super authentic flight sim shooter that still rates as one of the best Star Wars games ever. But then, in 1999, there began a great disturbance in the Force, like a million Star Wars fanboys crying out in unison and suddenly silenced. We speak, of course, of the prequel trilogy, and they were rubbish.
The reading is off the chart.
Midi-chlorians turned the once enigmatic Force into a microbial infection. A future Darth Vader was turned into a romantically inept dweeb. And finally, this jibe-talking space alien blew apart the last remaining credibility like a pair of photon torpedoes to a Death Star exhaust port.
I'm stuck.
Needless to say, these weren't the sequels we were looking for, and nothing short of a Jedi mind trick was going to convince us otherwise. This didn't stop LucasArts from trying to cash in on the mess they'd made, though, and the first game to try it was this. Inspired by the Phantom Menace's most elaborate action scene, Episode 1 Racer put you behind the controls of an anti-gravity chariot and sent you hurtling around the galaxy's most dangerous tracks. And unlike the movie it was based on, this thing was serious fun. However, for every good game, there were a couple of bad ones, like the official tie-in with the Phantom Menace. Gives me chills just thinking about it. Thankfully, the new millennia is where the Star Wars series really started to pick up again. The Rogue Squadron series would continue, with 2 more fantastic sequels on the GameCube. Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Galaxies would successfully bring the series into the online multiplayer and MMORPG genres, and most recently the entire saga would be combined with the world's favorite blocky children's toy for the radical reimagination that was LEGO Star Wars. There are, of course, way too many Star Wars games to mention individually, but with The Force Unleashed coming up next week, it's fair to say that the Force will be with us, always.
Good game.
2 years of research, another 5 of development, various celebrity endorsements, newspaper DVD bundles, and what's possibly the biggest publicity push we've ever seen for a game all comes to a point this month as Spore, the creation by Maxis Software and Will Wright, finally gets its chance to populate our homes.
In case you've been living under a very big rock with other rocks on top of it and you haven't heard, Spore is a very cute, malleable game about creation and discovery. It takes you from a tiny celled organism to a galactic empire, with your actions along the way determining the success and personality of your species.
To kick things off, it's a cell-eat-cell world where only the biggest and the toughest survive. By attacking, running away, or just generally eating, you gain DNA, which helps you move up the food chain. First thing I thought, Jung, was that this was a very cute version of Flow.
By mating, you can change the way your character looks. As you can see, we're not talking about a new hat here, we're talking about starting from scratch with a blob of life. The cell stage is short, pretty, and simple.
Different body parts have different attributes, such as health, attack power, and speed. Once you've eaten your fair share of organisms and had some organism love, it's time to stretch your legs on land. Jung, I love this creature creator.
It is very simple to use, and you can see the online community really getting into it. Some of those creatures out there put your little yellow fly parakeet to shame, Badge.
Hey, you leave little Badger Pants alone or he's going to come eat your herbivores. In fact, you're rewarded for putting as many bits as possible into this creature, so it forces you to spend time here. There's such strong code here, and you really start to appreciate it once you take your guy out for a stroll to interact with other species. Gameplay in this area felt a bit simple to me, Jung. I mean, just mimicking species again and again did get a little dull.
Yeah, I think it's purposely designed that way to ease new players into the interface, Badge. I would have preferred more complexity here, but a dumb animal's brain is pretty dumb to begin with, right? So it makes sense that communication is harder. Once you've made enough friends, or in the case of Badjo, tried to make friends but ended up eating them because they didn't like your dancing, it's time to get into some RTS.
The design of your race from the previous stage of evolution starts to have more impact here. If you're a predatory race, you better have some spiky bits on you. If not, then you better know how to play a musical instrument.
There is some micromanagement of food and population, but it never really gets overwhelming, and in fact, all in all, it's just a lean towards the next evolutionary step, and things get a bit hairy when you start to form your first civilization.
A successful civilization depends on being able to build enough of a trade route to be able to buy other civilizations, or have enough units to be able to destroy them. Money's really important here, and also you have to place your buildings in the right place within your city walls to keep your people happy. And for my race, it was about putting as many cannons as possible on your tank.
I saw you put a cannon inside another cannon, Badge. Don't you think that's a little bit overkill?
Well, it didn't really help, Jung. I almost didn't make it. I think I ate too many friends along the way. There's a few different ways you can get through this stage. You can just simply overwhelm the enemy and they'll surrender to you even without military force, or you can use the ICBM, which is the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile to end all intercontinental ballistic missiles.
You launched it, didn't you? We actually wanted to spend a little longer in this stage of evolution, mainly because it was the first stage to offer a good challenge and depth to the economy.
True, John, but you know, it's not a full-blown RTS, this game, so it's not really aimed at RTS gamers. I didn't mind moving on.
I just don't see why it couldn't be this interesting the whole way through, Badge. Early stages, to me, were tedious, especially as a herbivore.
See, I got a lot of joy out of these early stages, watching my race run around like crazy and move up the food chain. But I guess it's all a big setup for space.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Bajo. Its mission, to terraform strange new lands and boldly go where no pants have gone before.
In this stage, you'll be establishing trade routes, abducting aliens, going on missions for other species, and generally shooting off a few happy rays for lols.
I heard many slaps coming from your direction in this stage, Badge. What was happening?
You know what? I never thought I'd say this, Jung, but Spore has too many space pirates.
Blasphemy!
Oh, it's true. I didn't feel I could move ahead because I kept having to go and look after my home race and fend off space pirates and other races.
I think it was your poor dancing, Badjo. Knowledge of it spread throughout the galaxy.
Possibly, Jung. I didn't really get a chance to push ahead to the center of the universe, where it's hinted that something mysterious is going on with the evil alien race known as the Groks, who like to cause trouble. It's quite a trek, actually, to get to the center of the universe, and costs a lot of money because you need a lot of fuel and a lot of weapons.
Thankfully, if you do find yourself in a bind like Badge, you can start the game from any stage, with any race you or anyone else in the world has created. This is the big picture stuff with Spore. It all comes together here. You can import any vehicle, house, or race, any creation into your colony.
In fact, there's already millions of creatures online right now.
I really liked that you could automatically add creatures that your friends made through the Sporecast. You can download them individually, subscribe to a Sporecast, or send them in an email to a friend. You can also add a theme to your imported race, such as a Sporecast or your own creation.
The online aspect of Spore has pollinated content, and this is content which you've downloaded and it's pollinated into your game, and then the AI takes over and controls it. It remains to be seen how successful this is, Jung, but you know, if it all balances out okay, I think we're going to see some pretty interesting stuff over the next few months.
The developers refer to Spore as a massively single-player game. You can't fight your friends live, but you can import their creatures, hunt them down, and laser them.
If you've ever played the classic space game Elite, you'll feel right at home in the space stage as you go around buying and selling spice to gullible races.
It takes a while to get used to the universe interface in Spore, and it can get a bit cluttered. Space is big, and the endgame here is really what you make of it. Spore is a lot of different parts all jumbled into one, and we haven't even mentioned the seamless progressive music, the video capturing abilities, and much, much more, but I think it's time for final thoughts.
I think Spore's really what you make of it, you know. My first run-through was kind of like a 7.5, 8, but had a lot more fun on my second one. It was closer to a 10, so I think we're going to round it off to a 9.5. I definitely want to spend some more time with this game.
I don't think I had as much fun as you did with it, Badge. I didn't really enjoy making the creatures or the houses. Maybe it was because the early stages were quite basic point and click and my initial impressions of the game weren't so good. It does get more complex later on, and I can 100% see how it would appeal to a broad range of people. Me, not so much. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So gamers, did you guess the game for this week?
It is The Marriage, just one of the many games that Sims boss Rod Humble designed whilst not at his day job.
The Marriage is Rod's attempt to make games an art form in their own right, not a hybrid that borrows from other media like films or poetry or painting or books.
The Marriage does have rules, but they can be interpreted as you wish, which is pretty tricky to explain, but if you're interested, check out The Marriage online. It should be available as a free download if you want to try it out.
Well, that's the show for this week.
Next week, we're unleashed with The Force Unleashed, the game that's supposed to fill the gap between the two Star Wars movie trilogies.
And we meet the man behind internet phenomena Red vs. Blue and have a crack at making some machinima of our own.
Poor Donut. I'll miss him like a sister.
Plus, Backwards Compatible takes a look at the history of these and just what influence these handhelds have had on today's gaming.
Till next week, gamers, Bajo out.
Junglist out.